Hello everybody, I'm Dawn Campbell, Director at the IAPC&M, and I'm your host for today's exciting CPD event. So I'm delighted to see so many practitioners from around the world on this call, so thank you for your interest and support. We're going to have a great 45 minutes together. But first, I'd appreciate it if everybody could just mute themselves. This will ensure the best possible recording for the many practitioners who have requested a copy of the call because they can't make it today. So without further ado, let me introduce you to the person in the hot seat today, and that's Cinnie Noble. Welcome, Cinnie.
Thank you.
And rather than repeat your interesting and diverse biography, Cinnie, as most people have already read about it anyway, I just wanted to say that we're super thrilled to have a speaker of your caliber and expertise to explain in more detail about how best to manage conflict, not least because I know that clients have increasingly complex and sophisticated needs. And today, more than ever, we live in a blame culture. So anything that will help us better understand how to manage this kind of communication sabotage has got to be a good thing. Because I know for many of us, this is a new skill. And to be honest, I have to admit, it's something I'm not particularly comfortable dealing with. So, Cinnie, I know you're going to share with us your proven framework for dealing more effectively with conflict. And you also have a special offer to announce at the end. So if I could hand over to you now, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dawn, and I really appreciate that. I'm here today to talk to all of you. It seemed a long time ago that we started to plan, and here I am, and I'm so delighted to meet you. Thank you for joining the call. I'm going to talk to you. I'm actually not going to be teaching about conflict management. I'm going to be telling you about this particular process. And the importance of being conflict confident as a coach, though, is very important because you're going to have it in your face all the time, either hearing it from your clients or having to deal with it. So I think it's one of those specialties that has a wide application. And so I'm going to go in our time together, and I'm just trying to move ahead my slide here. I might need your help. There we go. Okay. So here are the objectives today. I'd like you to learn about a context for our discussion. So conflict management coaching is also known as conflict coaching. I use the expression conflict management coaching more because when it came to selling the idea to clients and to sponsors, people who wanted to retain me to come into their organization, the words conflict management coaching landed better. I have no rhyme or reason for that, just to let you know. So, but you'll hear it referred to both ways. I'm going to talk about what distinguishes this process from other types of coaching, and I'm going to give you a tool that I use and talk to you about the stages of the model. So the context that I want to talk about is it's important to look at what is conflict. And here are the main ingredients. At least one person perceives there's something amiss. So it takes just one person. If you're feeling some anger at somebody or some upset about what they've done or they haven't done, you are in conflict. So they don't have to know that you are. As long as there's starting to be a perception in yourself that there's something going wrong, you are in conflict. Incompatibilities are evident. It's often about your perspectives, the way you look at things, your goals, your interests, your needs. It is in ways of communicating. It could be an attitude. There are just incompatibilities between the two people who are in conflict. The person or persons who perceives discord experience negative emotions. So those negative emotions, it wouldn't be a conflict if you didn't feel negative emotions. And they can be preoccupying. They prevail, they bother us, they stay with us. And often even when a conflict is over, we agonize about it. So emotions, important part. Fault finding. It's hard to find a conflict without somebody blaming somebody for something. It's what they said or did, what they didn't say or do, how they're acting, how they're behaving, how they're speaking, their attitude, how they look, the face, look on their face. All of that, people attribute fault. Very common part of conflict. And external and internal reactions commonly occur. So sometimes with my clients, I'll ask them what's the impact rather than what's going on for you emotionally, because the word impact covers a lot. And so if clients tell you more about I'm not sleeping at night, and I'm clenching my fists, and I find my forehead and my jaws are just so tight, then that's important way that they're expressing what's going on for them. And that will be important in coaching to be able to measure, is there some release of that? And lastly, there's a desire to do something about the conflict. We don't like to stay in conflict. Nobody wants to be in conflict. And as a mediator and as a former lawyer, what I know is that some people just want to get it over. Let's settle it. Let's make it better. What happens is that people come to me because that's not the way that they want to cope anymore. That's not working anymore. So I'm going to get in more now to talk to you about what conflict management coaching is and how to distinguish it. And by the way, if you've got questions, just put them in the chat box, and I'm going to stop every once in a while, and Dawn will tell me what questions you might have. So what is conflict management coaching? It's a one-on-one process in which a trained coach helps clients gain increased competence and confidence to engage in their interpersonal conflicts and disputes. So it's both interpersonal, and it's about people wanting to be their best version of themselves when they're in conflict. It's about optimizing their potential to engage in conflict. And in the field of alternate dispute resolution, which is my background as a certified mediator, some of the language has changed a bit from managing conflict to engaging in it. In other words, conflict's out there, it's inevitable, it's normal, part of living with people, working with people. So is there a way that we can learn to be in conflict and to be accepted, to look at conflict as a necessary part of our lives, and how we're going to deal with it more effectively? So there are many, many applications of this process. It depends, any coach that I know, no matter what kind of coaching you do, family, whether it's families or individuals or whatever it might be, leaders inevitably hear about conflict. So it could be that you'll get people before a conflict has arisen. That's the best case scenario. That's the proactive person that says, I'm about to deliver a performance review and I know it's going to go off the rails quickly. Or I have to have a really difficult conversation with my sister, or anything where someone knows what's going to happen could be problematic and cause conflict. Then people come because they want to better manage, how am I going to be in that? How am I going to handle? And often people perceive that there are going to be issues. It's interesting that if any of us are going to have a difficult conversation, one of the reasons that we find it difficult is that we are afraid of conflict. We're afraid of offending the other person. We're afraid that they're going to offend us. And so it's how we receive statements, it's how we deliver statements, it's how we respond effectively. And so people who come proactively before the conflict are trying to nip it in the bud. They might anticipate it could be problematic, but they want to know how best to manage it or engage in it. It could be that it's during conflict, and that is it's already started. And someone says, this is going off the rails, I've got to do something to better manage it. And those people will hire me for that reason as well. They know they're into it. It could be after, and this is where people are not resilient, organizing. They realize that there's something to be learned from the conflict, or they don't realize that. They just feel like I'm still playing things over and over in my head. And most often those people are hiring me because they are in pain about it, but they want to figure out, I've got to do this differently. It's just not working anymore. And often there are patterns that people have, and they realize it, or they come in coaching to realize that they follow a pattern, which I'm going to talk to you about in a few minutes. General conflict competence is also, people will hire me. This is often leaders in organizations and who are always in the face of conflict, and they are saying, I just, conflict could happen at any time. I anticipate it all the time. I know certain people in the fundraising group or in my board or something, they're going to give me flack. And so they want to, it's not one type of dispute, it's generally being able to manage friction. And lastly, but not least, because I'm a mediator, I deal with pre-mediation coaching. It could be pre-negotiation coaching and post. And that's people who know they're going into a process that could be fractious, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to manage it. And whether it's mediation or a group meeting or negotiation or any kind of process, those are the kinds of applications. And again, it could be in any interpersonal disputes, the application, so anybody who is facing that possibility or is in one. So many contexts are the types of things that I've just talked about, and most of my clients are organizational. When I started, I had been a family mediator, and most of my work was dealing with families. I shifted that when I did a Master's of Law and alternate dispute resolution to workplace. And as many of you would know, worked in organizations, there's sort of a family thing that happens there. It's like, it can be a quite dysfunctional family at times. And so most of my work now is within the family context, or within the workplace conflict. But I've had other things come my way, and just to let you know about it, when I set myself up as dealing with conflict, it could come in any context. So I have a call the other day, and I'm meeting with the person later this afternoon, and that is about dealing with an estate issue, a family issue with it. You know, where's mom going to go? Some of the family thinks she should be in a home, some at the work, at staying where she is, going to one of the kids' homes, and it's become a huge dispute. And so the client that's coming to see me is going to be going into a mediation, but she is the elder in the family, and she knows a lot is on her. So she wants to be prepared, because she knows what all her siblings are going to say, and she wants to be prepared to deal with it differently. It doesn't end up in an argument as it normally does. So that's an interesting, another proactive kind of context. But any place that people have interpersonal disputes. So what's interesting, as in any coaching model, is to make sure that people are clear about what their goals are. And the kinds of goals that people have that are here are anything from to figure out whether to do anything. Sometimes people decide, no, I'm not going to, but not without wanting to contemplate and reflect what's gone on for them. So to figure out what to do with anything, to prepare for conversation, performance reviews, etc., to better understand the conflict. Sometimes people say, I don't know what's happening. I'm just feel I'm really confused, so I need to get my head on straight. And the process provides a way for people just to start to digest it and dissect it. To resolve a conflict, to vent, to the coach. They just want to get something off their chest and talk about it and hear themselves out. When I did the research on developing the model, I just listened to and without giving any sort of reframing or summarizing, I just wanted to hear. And people would say, this is the first time I've actually told this conflict and someone hasn't tried to make it better, give me advice, so interrupt in some way. So just listening is what some people just want. And then they are more primed to look at what to do about it. So it could be less accommodating, more competitive, less competitive, to not get defensive when. All of these are the types of goals that commonly come my way. Are there any questions yet, Dawn?
I think I'm building a list of questions, but I don't want to interrupt the flow. So no, you go on, please. Thank you.
All right. So in the research I did, I have been mediating for many years in various organizations. And I went to a number of them to say, I'd like to interview some people about conflict. And actually I'm wanting to develop a coaching model, but I'd like to work with some people who are having some struggles with conflict. And what I'd like to do is work with them for an hour a week for the next 6 weeks, and then bring all the people that I'm working with together for a day to go through what I'm learning about what could be a model. Could you give anybody up? Well, I could have had hundreds of people. People were more than willing, the organizations, to get, as long as they knew that I was trying, and these are obviously places that I've had a relationship with. I've been working either previously as a lawyer and then as a mediator, but all they heard was people having trouble managing conflict, and I had many names coming my way, but I started small. I started with 12 people, and then eventually grew this because I wanted to review the research. And what I wanted to find out was if people could identify more about their conflict stories, where they began, what started them getting provoked. Could they then be able to aim at, here's the root cause, this is what I have to address with the other person? Because conflict, as I saw it as a lawyer and mediator, was that it would get so blown out of proportion that nobody really could identify why. So I was curious about that. I did a lot of research over a year and a half, almost 2 years. And I learned a lot. And even though I'd worked in the conflict field for many years, what I learned is what I'm going to share with you, because it then formed the model that I then developed. So one of the biggest learnings was that interpersonal conflict occurs when we perceive that the other person threatens, challenges, or undermines one or more of our values or needs or aspect of our identity. So I want to break that down a bit. What I want to tell you, though, how this came about is that when people told their conflict stories, 98% of the time, they would start with something that sounds like, I was in a meeting and Harry continually interrupts me. It so bugs me. So the interrupting is the initial trigger. I think that he is trying to be better than me. He's trying to show off. I'm smart too. So there was this sort of trajectory that people went through. And they named firstly what the action was. I hate when Harry interrupts me in the meetings. And then they would typically go to something like, I've got lots to say too, or I'm smart too, or something that indicated that they were perceiving that Harry, even though Harry might not have meant to do any of that, was undermining them by doing what they were doing. And that came up 98% of the time. So put your head around this. Think about when somebody offended you, what they did. Think about a dispute you've had with somebody where it blew up. And the starting point is, think in your mind, what did they say or do? Or what didn't they say or do? Maybe it was their attitude. Were they condescending? Was it a look on their face? What was it that you perceived, well, that you initially were triggered by? And then think about, what was that undermining for you? What is it, a value you have? Is it something you needed from them? Respect. So looking at a value or values, needs, or something about your identity. So Harry, I could say about Harry interrupts me in front of everybody. I know that he's just trying to vie for the job that I want. He's just out there to do that. And I'm senior here. So that would be an aspect of my identity that I was getting undermined by Harry's interrupting me. So Harry could be doing it for any number of reasons, but my perception is what's important. So that was a huge learning around this, that if we could identify what was the starting point, look at the incident, and at what point did we start to get triggered? And what did we perceive was being undermined by being triggered that way? So that was pretty important, and this ultimately led to the not-so-merry-go-round of conflict. And this was named by the first group of 12, and I'm going to walk you around it, because this is an important tool that coaches who get trained in the model learn how to help people dissect, deconstruct their conflict. So it starts with the precipitating interaction at the top. What happened? So go back to the incident that you just thought about. What went on between the two of you? And what did the other person say or do? I've already asked you that. And what was under that? What was undermined for you? What did you need from them? So what I'm telling you is this is the common trajectory, the sequence that people told me about over and over without saying it, but that the way they told their conflict stories followed this. So after looking at they talk about the trigger point, then they go to the impact. So I might say about Harry, it makes me so angry. I get really irritated and put off by him doing that. And I find that I freeze up in the group because I'm so angry that I don't get to say what I want. That would be more about the impact. So think for you, what was the impact on you when the other person triggered you? And then people, 98% went to an assumption why the person did what they did. It's some level of consciousness. So I might say about Harry, he's just a show-off. He's just trying to put me down. He's vying for that job. All those things are assumptions. And it usually goes to a motive. We assume certain things when people trigger us in certain ways, and it's a certain impact on us, we make assumptions about it. And we can generalize that. If someone else did the same thing, we might. But with other people, we might not, because if we have a closer relationship or other reasons could change what might get undermined or whether we do. But if somebody's bugging us, and then we are usually, it's having an impact and it's undermining us, and we make assumptions. So the right side of the merry-go-round is internally what we're experiencing. It's what we're thinking and feeling at an unconscious and subconscious level. If the more the person does it, the more that builds up. So the trigger might get repeated or more triggers, but we are all the more sensitive to being triggered once it's started. And the internal conflict can go on and on and on, and sometimes the other person has no idea, or they get a sense something's not so great here, but they don't really know because you're holding it inside. But one day, it might cross the boundary. The very bottom is the boundary. The boundary is it's gone too far. And at that point, we externalize. So now we're going up the left side. Now it's an external dispute. It's no longer an internal conflict. And up the external side, we react. Harry, you are a pain in the neck. You keep on interrupting me. You have to show off in front of everybody. So I might just externalize. All of a sudden, now Harry knows why I haven't liked how he's acted in a meeting. Maybe the boundary crosser was one more time of it, but maybe Harry interrupted me in front of a client. That might be the bigger boundary crosser. So something, it goes too far, whatever it is, where we then let the other person know. And as you go up the left side, you'll see there are consequences. And the consequences, there are always consequences when we have it internally. It's not great for our health to be carrying around conflict. But the bigger consequences, once it's external, is that then it's out there. Then you're in a dispute. Other people might know about it. You and Harry are not getting along. It exacerbates the conflict, the dispute. That trajectory that I've just told you about was founded, I did this experiential research, but as I'm writing a book on this years ago, somebody sent me an article that talked about neuroscientists in California who found that the same trajectory, they had different words for it, but they looked at emotional regulation once people are provoked. The same trajectory is what they found, that where the brain is going and how people talk. So I was quite glad about that, because it was a practice looking for a theory, and I realized that it was brain-based. That's our brain goes from the amygdala, once it's hijacked, as you know, probably know if you've looked at or studied some around the neuroscience, there you are in a state and your thinking processes are breaking down, and it's really difficult to start to think, to use your prefrontal cortex. And the merry-go-round depicts that. But what's really significant about the merry-go-round, not just what I've told you because it's the sequence that has been found in science, is that in my groups, this isn't what the scientists did, this is what I did, was that if I took the merry-go-round and said to my study groups, now see if you can track how the other person went on a merry-go-round, what merry-go-round they got on. In other words, the merry-go-round is a common way that all of us deal with conflict. So you're not blaming your client. You're saying, you observed that person getting upset with you. Let's look at what happened for them, what merry-go-round they got on, and you track the same merry-go-round. So if you've been following this, you would be looking at your assumptions, what crossed a boundary for you, what you said or did that externalized it, what the consequences were. And then I'm going to ask that you look at, you can do this certainly on your own, and when you get the slides, take this and look at what would the other person say you said or did that triggered them. What was undermined for them, looking at values, needs, identity. What was the impact? What might they assumed about why you did that? What went too far? How did they react? What are the consequences for them? So the merry-go-round has become a tool that I use in coaching, and it's a really important one because it helps people analyze. It gets to what I said at the very beginning. If we can get underneath our conflicts to find out what started them, what are they all about, then it's easier to analyze. And by the time you get to this stage of the model, then you're moving people from reaction to reflection. This is a reflective tool, to response, which is what you're going to help them do differently. So I'm going to go through that now to explain the 7 stages of the model and where this fits in. So it's called the synergy model, and the first stage is to clarify the goal. Why is the person in front of you? Inquire about the situation is for people to tell you what happened. It's a straightforward, complex story time where people are telling you what is bringing them there, why they have a goal at all about the conflict, because of something that's happened between them and another person. Name the elements is the merry-go-round. So when that stage comes, by this time you're breaking down the first 3 stages. You've got the goal, the clients talk about what's going on for them, and then you help people break down, move from the emotion they're expressing in the I stage to the end stage, where they start to deconstruct the conflict by looking at the merry-go-round from their perspective and from the other person's perspective. So this model doesn't happen in one session. It happens over time. So you might only get to that stage. You might only get to part of that stage because the analysis is difficult for people. After you do name the elements, and there's some other sort of checking in with people about their goals, because sometimes they change after they've looked at it closer. And then you start to look at, so what can you do about it? What are your choices here? And people analyze their choices. They look at it, the pros and cons of them from their perspective and the other client, and then the other person's. The R stage is making the choice real. So it's reconstructing it. You've had this conflict, you've broken it down. Look at your choices. Which one or ones do you want to try out? They may go and try something. They may practice a conversation. They might envision. They might figure out what kinds of things are going to do differently. It's all about starting to, what's going to be different now? What do I have to do differently now that I've deconstructed my conflict so that I can reach the goal that I want? What's going to be different? So deconstruct can take a lot of sessions as well. And you don't actually move into the next stage, ground the challenges, until someone's made up their mind. What's going to get in your way of doing it is the G stage. What will stop you? Now that you've figured out what you want to do about this, what will stop you? And the Y stage is the commitment. When are you going to do this? How? It's logistical. It's the commitment. So the 7 stages came about from the research that I did and finding out what moved people. And this takes me to the next slide to describe to you what distinguishes this model from others. And as you can already see, one of the first things is it's linear. I thought it was going to be a looser dance. And I was surprised that what people said was that the linear nature, step by step by step, helped people take the chaos out of the conflict. It was a slow moving process. So the goal question is, what do you want? It's not what do you want to do today. The goal question is, what do you want to do by the end of coaching about your conflict? What's the hope? And so you work towards that. And that's a really important part that distinguishes. It's not to think that in one day, in one session, you're going to reach a goal where someone says, I've got to go talk to the person, or I've got to make it better. It's going to happen over time. And the goal is more far-reaching, because conflict is disempowering, and it takes people a while to figure out. It's usually taken a while to get there. So it's a more linear process for sure. And the different perspectives, the conflict analysis is different. You're not going to find that in most coaching models, that you have a way to dissect the conflict the way the merry-go-round does that. There are specific reasons. So in my model of coaching, it's very self-determinative. There's not one time that I or the coaches that work for me or are trained by me will give an opinion or give advice. It's all around helping people figure out for themselves. They are the authority on what they can do in their context. And that's a really important message, because often, even if you were terrific at conflict and could tell someone what to do, that may not be the way they could manage it themselves. the idea is that people figure out for themselves what will work with me and that person and this context. And so it's totally around self-actualization. Another last point I'm going to mention now is the emotional aspects, of course, are important, and I've talked about those before. But I just want to mention that often coaches being trained in this, who've trained in other models, spend a lot of time on the emotional part of it. And you don't need to. It is a disservice to people to keep them in their emotional brain. While they might express it and want to express it, and you work with it in the first session, if people continue to stay there and you're in a third session and you're asking emotional questions and keeping them there, you're not moving them along. So it's really being careful about how much time you spend on the emotional piece. There's some literature that says that you can overvent and that venting is overrated. And so while it seems like a natural thing to do with conflict, many times people have told their conflict story 5, 6 times, maybe more, and it's distorted by that time. So you don't have to spend an enormous amount of time on facts at all. Facts are not as important as what people want to do about it. And nor do you spend the time on staying with the emotions. So of course people often cry and they're upset, or they'll stay in the emotion when in the I stage when they're talking about what's happened for them. However, when they're ready to move on, move on. If they're not ready to move on, you might stay there longer, but you just want to be careful about not keeping them in the amygdala part of their brain. So those are most of the things that distinguish this model, and this came from the research, and I've been doing it for years now. I developed the model in 1999, trained thousands of people, and it is workable. So, but part of it is shifting. So when people are coaching somebody and they bring up a conflict, what do you do about it? I'm asked that a lot by coaches who I train or speak to, and so I say, this is when you say, so I have a different model just for that, and you shift while you are managing to deal with this. Some people just incorporate parts of the model that they learn into their regular practice. It's totally up to you, but I think what's important is that the aspects of dealing with conflict management coaching around making sure that people are able to step back, get some emotional distance, look at it from the other person's perspective, look at their assumptions, are they valid? Those are really important aspects that need to be done in order to effectively help people look at themselves in conflict. So I'm going to, we're near the end, and I just want to stop to see if there's some Q&A.
I'm sure there's lots of questions, Cinnie. So while everyone's composing themselves, I'll just say thank you, because that was very interesting. And you've got a lovely voice to listen to. I can imagine, if people are in conflict and you're the mediator, it has a very calming effect. So pitch tonality must be so important.
Yeah, it's important to be, I think it's important when you're dealing with people in conflict is to be calm yourself and to be, thoughtful. And I meditate before I go into any session, because conflict is hard. I mean, people are very, in various states, they're not thinking clearly yet. And so, I think they look to you to model calmness.
Yeah, a bit different. I think it might have been a John Cleese training clip that actually, if somebody's really irate, get irate with them, and then they feel that there's that empathy, and then gradually you bring them down. But yeah, so if everybody would like to unmute themselves, and Cinnie will take your questions now, because I'm sure you've got them. So fire away.
Anybody?
You need to unmute yourself first. Yeah. I mean, I'm just unmute a couple of people, because I can do that manually as well. I think you're right. A lot of people are afraid of conflict. I am afraid of conflict, and I know I feel it in my tummy, and I just don't feel good, and I don't want to go there, and I will do anything to avoid conflict. That must be the sort of common scenario, I would guess. And then they have to deal with it, all the internal stuff afterwards, and the other person isn't there to give their perspective or their side of it. How does that work?
Well, So I don't mediate and coach the same people, right? So I don't bring the other person in. I do coach people going into mediation, both of them, but not to the extent that I do here. I just get them ready to, you know, what they're going to say, how they're going to say it. But, you know, because this is just one-on-one work, and people, it's helping that person who wants to deal with it independently. So that's totally how it works. And I'm actually glad to see that there's been a shift in people learning, wanting to be confident and wanting to manage it, so that they don't end up, because mediation, by the time people get to that process, they might be more entrenched. So, but when I do prepare people for mediation now, they are better prepared than they used to be when I wasn't a coach. So it is an important part of helping people get there. But most people would rather it all go away, and you know, and I think one of the things we have to be careful about in this is to go slowly. And you know, I could do 6 to 8 sessions, about an hour each. When it's dealing with conflict competence, it could be 2 and 3 months at a time. So people go up to face a conflict. So it takes time for people to start to look at who they are in conflict and who they want to be.
Yeah, because it's all too easy just to blame the other person and say it's not them, but actually it's a lot to do with our perception and our own attitude, isn't it? So working to change. It's kind of like that book, Ken Blanchard, Who Moved My Cheese? You know, you don't change the situation at home or in the workplace. It's how you change your perception and your attitude that brings immediate improvements.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of conflict management coaching too, is around, it's changing perceptions, it's reframing what's going on. Now, what else could be there? That you're making that assumption about Harry, I might think, well, maybe Harry's doing that. You know, he's insecure, and he's not meaning to offend me. And you know, if I have a conversation with Harry early on to say, Harry, you know, I don't know if you realize when you do that, he may say, well, too bad. But you know, I think we get carried away with our assumptions, and I think that's what gets a lot of trouble.
Well, with that too bad comment, you know, some people are genuinely feel like that, don't they? They either thrive on causing conflict or they genuinely enjoy it. I just find that very odd, but it's true. There are people like that.
Right? They probably are. Those aren't the people that come to me. I think you're right.
Yeah, they enjoy needling other people is what we say. Anyway, so I can see some people have unmuted themselves, so I don't want to hog all the time. So please ask your questions.
Well, why don't yeah, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Cinnie, regarding the merry-go-round that you've described.
Yeah.
How do we recognize the boundary? I mean, between assumptions and external reaction, when it goes from internal to external, what sort of boundaries are there, and how do we recognize that in a conflict?
So usually it's whatever the person said or did or didn't say or do that just you'd had enough. So, you know, Harry kept interrupting me. And then one day he did it in front of the client. That to me would be a boundary crosser. Our boundaries differ. It could be that, you know, sometimes our boundaries cross when someone repeats something too many times. And then we go, I can't take enough. I can't take it anymore. So it's usually the thing that says, this is as much as I can tolerate. Your toleration piece.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, in the interest of time, then I'll move. Here's about how to contact me if you'd like to. And on my website, there's a blog called Conflict Mastery Questions. And these are really interesting questions for, you know, that you can use, like it might say something on blame, and then it'll be a little write-up about blame, and then there'll be 12 questions you can ask yourself or have your clients do. So there is a book, though, if you look on my website, this is one of the gifts I'm going to give you today. On my website, under resources, you will see the book. It'll say Chapter 2. And if you would like to get Chapter 2 to download it, the password is GET, G-E-T, free, capital F-R-E-E, chapter, capital C-H-A-P-T-E-R. Get free chapter. GFC, they're all capitalized, the 3 words. And you can download that from my site.
Get free chapter?
Get free chapter is the password. Okay. And then there are other free resources there. There's a conflict resilience assessment tool. There's a number of things that are free on the site that you're welcome to do. And so I also have 2 books that I've written on this, and they're available under books. But I'm not here to sell them. I'm actually here to give one away. So the added gift here for one of you who stayed on the line here is if you send me the first person that I receive an email from that says book in the subject line, then put your address in any case. But the first person that does that, I'm going to send you the book called Conflict Management Coaching. This is the book written on the model. And so there you go. And in ending today, then, I just want to say, there's the gift. I just want to say that I really appreciate being here with you, and I want to thank you all and Dawn for organizing it. It was a pleasure. And if there are no last minute questions, I think our time is up. Dawn, do you have anything you want to add?
No, that's absolutely fine. I'll just check. Anybody got any questions? We are bang on time for 45-minute call. I suggest if anybody thinks of a question, they just email Cinnie or book her for a one-to-one because I know she's very helpful. But being respectful of time, we do have to say thank you very much for your interest and support. Thank you very much, Cinnie, for sharing your model with us. Great stuff. Really appreciate that. Given me a lot to think about as well. So thank you very much indeed. And I will say goodbye to everybody, and I will send you the slides and a copy of the recording so you can listen to it again and redigest it. Any questions, contact Cinnie or I directly. But thank you very much, Cinnie. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.